So a lot of people have been asking about builds, and I wanted to show the general Battlemaster build that I've come up with after a lot of testing. And this build has some pieces you can swap in and out, and I'll try to cover those. So the core of the build revolves around a quick and highly repeatable combo. Is good for damage on bosses, but it's also good for general clear, and that's using a 4-point pummel with darkness to do a 10% armor break, using whatever this thing's called, our little kick up. I currently have 4 points in it. We'll talk more about that later, but you can also go to 7, which gives you an additional 15% damage for 3 seconds if you hit one enemy twice. The little damage boost costs some points, might be worth it. I just use this because it's on a short cooldown, 8 seconds, and it allows you to fight large groups of monsters fairly easily. And then finally, a full 10 points into our Thunder Slam. This skill, when spec'd this way, with extra damage to elites, 30% overall increase in damage, and then a further 15%, and it loses its multiple moves. It makes it fast. It's on a very short cooldown. It's actually one of our higher damage per second abilities, so each cast is lower damage, but it's got half the cooldown. So here, let me just demonstrate that. Combat dummy. This thing hits for 3k, whereas like our flash kick here hits for about 6 total, so maybe even 6.5. Does twice as much damage, but it's got twice the cooldown, so these two are actually pretty similar. The only core spender in this build is our Wind Blast with 2 points in it. You can go for more, but the 2 points really are the core. You've got the extra damage to mobs, and then the big one is that the mob is the 30% increase attack damage for 5 seconds. And let me just make sure that I'm stating that correctly. Where's our skill planner? How did I lose it? This one? Nope. Here we go. Updated BM, this one. Sorry about that. Yeah, so attack strength is increased by 30% for 5 seconds. This is a really important buff. There's a lot of ordering that goes on in this build. Right, so that covers our top row. Then we have our 2 core high damage burst abilities. We have our Crescent Moon with Rising Moon on it. This thing just hits hard. And then we have our long, slow kick. Now what's really important with this kick is the second thing. This shadow, unlike the basic fists, is a 30% armor break for a little bit longer, right? So it's 30% for 5 seconds. And this is just general 30% defense, whereas the wording on our triple punch reduces all armor. I don't know whether that applies to sort of magic or elemental or physical, but it definitely seems to increase our damage in some situations. You can see one of my previous videos, these might not be working as intended. I think they're still what you want to take. Just in general, if they're not working now, they'll hopefully be fixed in the future. The skill is very slow, but it hits really hard, applies a powerful debuff. Applies a powerful debuff. Then the last core piece of this build, because you will be in party play sometimes, and this is generally an okay skill. It's not my favorite, but it's it's our blue buff. First row, you can really choose whatever you want. Where are we? Here we go. Right, I like the move speed one, but evasion makes sense. Critical resistance is going to make sense sometimes. The most important thing is that this is actually a crit buff. Otherwise, the attack speed, it's nice, but for solo play, it's not massive for the most part. And the movement speed also is nice, but take it or leave it. So the big thing here is this crit rate. and then I like to reduce the skill cooldown so we have more uptime on our crit rate. Um, this thing is actually full too, or useful too. It's fine, but I prefer the skill cooldown. That's our core thing, right? So just to go over it again, 4, 4, 10, 10, 10, 10 for the kick. We only need, oh, sorry, this one, this is an option, but we only need 7 for our only identity spender in the build, and we have a free slot. There's a bunch of things you can do with the free slot. First of all, you'll notice that I am at 44 points. As soon as I get 4 more skill points, that means we can take another ability to 10. So that means when I bother to go do tower at a higher level or any of the many other ways to pick up 4 more skill points, we have an additional 10-point ability. There are a couple of options, different directions you can go. You can go for a second party buff, so Dragon's Roar. This thing is terrific. It also scales well with other players' gear because it seems to increase critical. It reduces critical resistance, which I believe increases the damage that critical hits do. I did some light testing, was a little bit hard to tell, so not 100% sure on that. But we get, in the first row you can take whatever you want, but in the second row we get an extra 2 seconds. So it's on a 25-second cooldown, then it lasts for 8 seconds, so it's got about a 30% uptime, and then we can reduce the skill cooldown by another 5 seconds, giving it almost a 50% uptime if we want. Makes this a very nice follow-up debuff if you want to go the debuff route. If you want to go the higher damage route, there's a lot of options. A second identity skill is very possible. Exploding Quake, 10 points, is our highest damage identity skill. That said, its damage can be a little bit hard to land, so it's higher damage even if you only hit the last explosion and the aftershock using big explosion. You can also, however, if you want to, take Dragon's Ascend. It does less damage than Exploding Quake, but it's still pretty good. It's also just more generally very useful. This will help your AoE clear a lot. Helps you, gives you a little bit more single target. If you want to go full single target, Bubble Combustion. It's a self buff, so it doesn't help your party, but it's a great option. Again, the first tier, up to you. We're not really spending identity stuff, so this identity gain, not all that useful. Movement speed by 3 seconds, by 30% for 3 seconds. Cute, not amazing. I usually just go with damage reduction. And then this one's another 7-point wonder, or that's how I'm using it right now because I don't have those last 4 skill points to put 10 points in. This thing, as long as you can stand on top of the enemy, is insane. So if you can dodge around the boss, dodging their red circles, but they don't knock you away from them or whatever, this is a general 50% damage buff as long as it lasts. These 10 pointers are nice, they do some damage, but they're not crucial. If you do have the full 10 pointer, up to you which direction you go. The other option, by the way, movement skills are always appreciated. I personally like Phoenix Dive. It does reasonable damage. Spiral dash thingy, Dragon Spiral Kick is a little bit more movementy, also great. You can tech it to increase attack power by 20%, or you can have more of them. This is really a flex slot. It's whatever you want. So let's talk a little bit about how this build actually plays out. I uploaded a separate video with a little DPS test using my current point, so I was using the bubble buff. The really important things, hitting with these two skills early for the 30% armor break and the 30% damage buff for 5 seconds. So it's our full combo is self buff. Pop these, then unload with our other high damage abilities. You can check out the other video. I don't want to make this too long. That covers the build that I'm currently running, including some of the other options. If you want to run a 7-pointer here, by the way, you can increase either of these 4 pointers to 7 points. This does give us that access to the 15% increased damage for 3 seconds, We hit 2 enemies, again, stacking buffs by using buffs and debuffs in our skill set. It's one of the things that makes Battlemaster really strong. We debuff the enemies, which helps the whole party. We have party-wide buffs, and we still do pretty solid damage ourselves. Taking tier 2 here, it's nice, you know, if we can do 50% more damage to immune enemies with that one, you know, just solid punch that, you know, makes our punch hit a little bit harder.